All right, we're back with Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders. As I always say, go back and listen to those old episodes. So many good ones. I only do good podcast episodes. So there's a big catalog you can go through. Check out nosetotail.org. That's my company. And enjoy this one today with Stephen Kavanagh, good friend of mine from Ireland. He's the man. He's a marine biologist. He does a lot of research on oysters because he makes the best oysters in the world. He gets them into a supplement form. It's very pure. It's just dried oysters. They pack them by hand, actually. And these are the ones that I sell at Nose to Tail. These are amazing. I use them. And wow, it's actually boosted my testosterone a lot. I just got my labs back. It's incredible. I don't want to sell them too much. Just listen to this episode. It's more about deep nutrition, nutrient density, slow food, which is the real food movement, really, opposite of fast food. It's about human history and how we relied on oysters. Even 250,000 years ago, may have saved humanity. Way back in the day, they found all this evidence of humans eating oysters. We talk about the synergy of different nutrients and why they need to go together, these cofactors. And we talk a little bit about Ireland. I'm trying to get podcasts from all over the world, people studying cultures. And this is another one of them. Very interesting culture. They have interesting food traditions. So enjoy this one with Stephen. Check out nosetotail.org. Get yourself some pure oysters, and we'll see you next time. All right, Stephen, how's it going over there in Ireland?
Hi, Brian. Great to be talking to you again.
Absolutely. You're over near Dublin. I actually visited Stephen last year at the end of the year in fall, toured me around a bit. He's a marine biologist, kind of expert in deep nutrition, we'll call it, all the stuff that I talk about on the podcast. And yeah, tell us more about just your background as a marine biologist and kind of what you do.
All right. I'm a marine biologist. I've been at this for, oh God, I don't want to count, but about 35 years now. And I kind of specialize in shellfish and oysters. I worked at a good few places around the world in my early years after I graduated. And I did a stint in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest in the US doing salmon work in the rivers there in Oregon and Washington, and Columbia River, before coming back to Ireland when I started a company processing oysters. I always knew there was a lot of big oysters around Ireland and nobody really knew what to do with them. So we actually started smoking them and making pates, and we ran oyster bars in the organic farmers markets in Dublin. And there's not many things we haven't tried to do with an oyster at this stage. And kind of before lockdown, those lockdowns, we were whittling back on the food. It was just getting harder and harder to sell. And we dropped it then just before the lockdowns, just as well, because all the restaurants were closed anyway. They were our main customers for those products, and they closed our markets as well. Apparently, it's okay to go into a supermarket with a mask on your face, but it's not okay to go to an open air organic market to buy your food. So you can figure the logic in that one out. And they closed our markets, which never reopened. And like I said, so we're now really a wholly dietary supplement manufacturer. We do some fish oils, and our main product is an oyster extract that we take these big wild oysters off the west coast, the northwest coast of Ireland, and we bring them back to our facility in Wicklow that you visited when you were here. And it's very much an artisan product. It's a handmade artisan product to keep you in line with our artisan values from when we started the business initially. We're very much about doing things as naturally and ecologically and keep it as close to the ecological baseline as we can, and in everything we do. So there's not many dietary supplement manufacturers apply those principles into making dietary supplements, but we're absolutely no chemicals, no fillers or anything in our products, and they're hand-filled capsules by our team, and they quite happy to do that. And we think it's possibly the cleanest and most transparent, one of the most transparent for sure, supplements on the market because of the way we test and display the data on the product and everything else.
Well, that's why we teamed up. So people may have heard of my product, Pure Oyster. That's with Steven. So he does the best in the world. And so that's the product that I use. I don't use any other supplements. I mean, of course, I've dabbled, I've tried, things over the years. People send me stuff, right? Like I've tried other supplements, but the only thing I take consistently is the pure oysters, because I think that's all you need. You eat real food, right? I'm eating all kinds of animal foods, eggs, whole foods on the side, and I don't always get my oysters in. There's so many nutrients in those, so I take the pure oyster, but that I make with nose to tail and Steven. So we'll get to that later, but mainly I just want to talk to him about oysters, nutrition, slow food. That's what it's called instead of fast food, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've talked to people all over the world. So go back and listen to these old episodes on Peak Human. I did one with Aviaha from Greenland. So we talked about the traditional diets, really interesting stuff. I talked to Frederick, the Sami reindeer herder up in the Arctic. I've talked to Mary Ruddick when we went to Tanzania and Uganda with the Hadza and the Maasai. And yeah, even Farmer Angus from South Africa, Bill Schindler, who, I believe, who's been around the world studying ancient food cultures. So now it's time to talk to Stephen about Ireland and, oysters. So yeah, tell us more. Tell us more. First, actually, I want to start off with that oysters are aphrodisiac, because I love that, because I used to think it was some hocus pocus, like airy fairy Chinese medicine, although Chinese medicine has some good stuff in it. But
Yeah.
to the mainstream, I thought it was bogus that they're aphrodisiacs, but there's some truth to it. So tell us more.
But you want to jump into the juicy stuff straight away, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
No messing around here. Yeah, so all throughout the ages, oysters have been hailed as an aphrodisiac, and for various reasons. One of them is when people eat them, they feel the effect, and they feel the aphrodisiac effect when they eat oysters. They didn't know how to explain it. We do now, of course, with modern science, but it kind of goes back to the Greek doctrine of signatures. So in ancient Greece, they had a doctrine called the doctrine of signatures, whereby if the food looked like a body part, they assumed it was good for it. So things like kidney beans were good for your kidneys. Walnuts, they thought, were good for your brain. Now, subsequently, we found that walnuts are high in omega-3s, so they are good for your brains. But likewise, a lot of phallic foods like asparagus, rhino horn, cucumbers, carrots, whatever looked like a phallus was supposed to be good for erections or male health. And some of them, yeah, there's a little bit of science. Some of them are total hocus pocus. But when I was researching that, I'd never heard the word yonic before. And then I thought, well, what is the opposite of phallic foods? If there's phallic foods for men, what have women got? And I came across this word called yonic. And then I heard the term yoni, which you're probably more familiar with, a woman's yoni. And I looked it up, and there are no yonic foods. There are some fruits, if you cut them in half or look at them from a weird angle, you might think they look like female genitalia. But the only true food that looks like a yoni is the oyster when you open it. And that possibly was part of it with the Greeks, but certainly the effect. There's very few foods that you feel an effect on like you do when you eat oysters, but they really do stimulate an effect in your body. And of course, subsequently now with modern science and chemistry, we've analyzed oysters and we know they're really high in zinc and copper, selenium. Zinc is really important for male prostate health, for testosterone production in men and women. It's important for sperm production. Selenium we should say. We're talking to America. Selenium is really good for spermatogenesis. There's B12 in there, really high in B12 again, which is really important for energy production and energy metabolism. And chromium, which is an interesting one around insulin metabolism. So there are a lot of elements in oysters that enhance energy levels and libido in humans, and we can prove that scientifically now. So absolutely one of the really true aphrodisiac foods out there. And of course, as you go through folklore, Casanova ate 72 oysters every day. He was the playboy of King Louis's court in France, and he got thrown out for messing around with Louis's women. So he was fond of eating oysters, and he had a very particular way of eating them as well, which I'll tell you about sometime again. You can try on one of your dates. Not really a first date maneuver, by the way.
Interesting. So that's where we get the term Casanova from, is this guy?
Yeah, Casanova. Yeah, he's an Italian. He has a famous book. Actually, my son is reading his book at the moment because he's heard me talking about Casanova so much at trade shows. He's reading Casanova's life works. He was a poet and a writer, and he hung out in the courts. But yeah, he was famous for eating 72 oysters a day. He said he ate six dozen a day. And those oysters were most likely from where I live in Ireland, believe it or not.
So yeah, there's some pure oysters over there.
Yeah. Some really good oysters on the East Coast here. But those ones we'll get into in a little while. They're the ones that are almost extinct that we devoured in the early 1900s. And there are different species now we work with. So yeah, you can be guaranteed an aphrodisiac effect if you partake of your oysters. I actually tell men zinc is so important for prostate health, and prostate swelling or hyperplasia is usually, or a lot of the time, it can be associated with zinc deficiency. So the prostate will swell before it goes malignant, and that swelling can be prevented in a lot of cases by proper zinc nutrition. When I ran the oyster bars, men used to come into me on Saturdays like junkies for their oyster hit with the shakes nearly. There was a whole queue of them, regulars every week that come in to get their oysters. And that's a really good thing. I tell people, especially men, if you can get fresh oysters, great. If you can't, you got the product there, perfect product for them. It's the next best thing.
Well, that's very important to me. People may know my dad passed away of prostate cancer. So
Oh,
I'm definitely interested in prostate health and taking my oysters or eating my oysters also for immunity too. I have this little trick that I learned, I don't know how, by trial and error or reading about it years ago, that if I'm a bit run down, I'm traveling, just a bit off of my normal health practices, I feel run down, I eat oysters and I just bounce back.
yeah, I used to
What is that? Is that zinc? Tell me more.
Yeah, I had we ran when we ran the Oyster Bar in Dublin. There's a New York flight gets in early morning to Dublin, and loads of people off that flight used to come straight into the Oyster Bar. We had a really good reputation for some of the best oysters around, and the oysters we were serving probably the best in the world because we're coming from the northwest of Ireland here, and loads of going around on the social media. As soon as you get off the flight, head for the Oyster Bar in Temple Bar to get rid of your jet lag. I always feel a bit weird after long haul flights. It takes me a few days to get back to normal. So oysters are really good because they've got all the vitamins and minerals that your body needs. There are 59 trace elements with known biological roles in the body, and the oysters have all of them in synergy with their cofactors. It really is a complete superfood. I like to call it the lost organ meat because it's completely nose to tail. This is your world. You're eating the whole animal. The shell is byproduct. So there's very few things where you eat the whole animal.
That's true. That's why, yeah, nose to tail, it fits in perfectly with my brand. But the immunity is amazing. Immunity support. I don't know. Maybe you can't make claims.
Well, you can, yeah. You can make claims on that product because of the zinc content. And zinc supports T helper cells. That's one of its mechanisms for supporting immunity. Without zinc, your T helper cells go down, and then the T cells aren't working properly. So you can make an immunity claim on the product you have on Oyster Pure because it has such high levels of zinc. And this is the whole thing with oysters. Oysters are unique in the animal kingdom. They're the only animal that accumulates zinc actively. So what that means is it expends energy to accumulate zinc intercellularly. So no other animal does this. If you put a mussel and an oyster in the same body of water, the mussel will accumulate zinc passively by osmosis almost from the water, but the oyster will do it actively. And the reason it does that is because the oyster lives in a very stressful environment and has to make large quantities of antioxidants. There's various reasons why they do that. But one of the reasons is to make antioxidants to live in such a stressful environment. They live between the tides, between high and low water. So when the water goes out, they're subjected to extremes of temperature, salinity, predation, and they can survive for weeks out of water, but it's very stressful. And they make these antioxidants, like the really important ones, the master antioxidants that they need copper, zinc, and manganese to make. And that's why they accumulate these really high levels of zinc. But they're unique in the animal kingdom. They're the only animal that does that. And as a result, oysters have 10 times more zinc than the next source, which is beef. And it's not just zinc. It's not like the synthetic zinc you're getting in the supermarkets. It's zinc with the cofactors like copper and manganese in nature's ratio, bound the way nature intended it to be. We don't do anything with the product. It's all done in the ocean.
It's so true. And I love you brought up nature's ratio because that's my thing with Sapien. The broader mission that I'm on, Sapien, is living closer to nature. And everything in life is better when you align to nature. I feel like most of modern problems, even depression, suicide, like these mental things, are because we've gone away from nature in our interactions, right? And with people. So if you need to look at nature's ratio, how foods come, how we live, how we move, how we get sunlight, right? And then with the food, the main problem, there's many problems with processed foods, but the main problem with how we eat and the processed foods is they're out of nature's ratio. We're trying to strip down foods, corn, wheat, soy, grind them up, sugar, random additives and build them back up into a food. That's not nature's ratio.
They're building them back up into a profit margin, not into a food. It's a joke.
Well, we need
We have a tragedy here in Ireland now after the lockdowns, because a lot of the big oyster producers are really struggling. They were promised subsidies and help from the European Union during the lockdowns because their businesses were devastated. And I was advocating here that all those oysters should be given out to the public for immunity. You know, everybody was taking synthetic zinc, and now they've got all the symptoms of copper deficiency because they were taking synthetic zinc. And when you do it like that, the copper and zinc are antagonistic. But when you take it from the oyster, they're in synergy with each other. And they've let the oyster farmers go to the wall, whereas they're subsidizing wheat, sugar, and everything else. And of course, the industrial food production, the industrial food complex love this. They can get a subsidized product and make an absolute killing on it, you know. And there's all your cheap cereals and breads and confectionery and everything else. And I mean, say, look, if you just look around, you see the problems that's causing, you know.
It's huge. This is what Food Lies is about. This is what this podcast is about. It's like so simple. If you just get back to nature, get back to real food, there's so much more science to it, because it sounds just kind of, I don't know, simple or just not that scientific, but there's a lot there when you look into it.
Yeah. For me, I have two kids that are in their early 20s, but for us, it's really like, for parents, it's just, you don't want the crap in the house, don't buy it. And food is really a habit, because if you eat good food, you won't eat crap. You won't be able to. Your body will reject it, you know. Like my kids, when they were going to school, they used to have these kids' parties at McDonald's, and they'd say, "We want to go to McDonald's to a party," and I'd say, "Well, I don't mind." I said, "Look, one McDonald's is not going to kill you. You're getting all your nutrition at home." But 2 or 3 times I went to McDonald's and ate the food and got sick, and they were like, they couldn't understand it. I said, "Your body's not able for it, you know. You've grown up on an organic, farm-reared diet, you know, and you just can't handle it." And then the really funny one time was my son came in. They were giving out these, what do you call them, Star Wars lightsabers free with the kiddies meals. And he came home and he said, Dad, he's only like 6 years old. He said, "Dad, everybody's got these lightsabers. We were bring me up to McDonald's and buy me a kiddies meal." He says, "I promise not to eat it." I said, funny. All right, there you go.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to that place where I just can't eat restaurant food, even, let alone fast food. It's just, it just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I'm on an organic diet completely, and you go to a restaurant, never mind is it organic, have they even bothered to wash the salads or the lettuce or whatever, you know. So, but I suppose I'm pretty carnivore these days, so it's not too bad. If I go to a good seafood restaurant, I can avoid all the nasties, the seed oils and the carbs and all that stuff.
It's good that you brought up carnivore, because I think these carnivore people need to look at some oysters. If you're eating all land animals, you're not getting iodine, you're not getting this copper, you're not getting these huge levels of zinc. It'd be really great to incorporate some oysters into your diet. Also, I want to go back. I was thinking about my dad a bit more. We just got tricked by the food pyramid. So I was thinking of why he got prostate cancer, because he was trying to do things right. I remember he was exercising into his late 50s and 60s. He was eating the low-fat foods, avoiding red meat, right? Doing the food pyramid stuff.
Yeah.
Never eating oysters. I remember he wasn't into seafood, wasn't into oysters, was, just eating the wrong things. And I guess slowly that catches up to you. And then into his 60s, he just got that belly fat. It's kind of unavoidable. You just keep eating the wrong things, even though you're trying to not eat too much. Your body just can't help it. It's getting the wrong nutrition, getting the wrong ratios of things. And he must have just gotten out of whack, gotten this metabolic disease, not had the zinc, and, who knows, maybe some other things, but it developed into prostate cancer.
Well, there's no recommended daily intake for carbohydrates. They know it themselves, but, it's all the marketing. People are sold all this stuff. It's just criminal. And as I say to people, I love the old Groucho Marx line, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? Look in the mirror. If you got belly fat, you got problems. You shouldn't be carrying that. And that's all insulin resistance going on there straight in front of you. And like a few years ago, I was 20 kilos heavier than I am now. So let's go. So that's over 40 pounds, And that I was working in the gourmet food industry. So every meal was put wine to pair with it and all this stuff. And like the food incredible, but I since I cut the carbs out, I come right down. I'm the same weight I am now as I was when I was 18. And I have a
Well,
little bit more I want to lose. For a guy who's 55 to be the same weight he was when he's 18 is not too bad, you know.
oh well, yeah, no, you're fit. You're looking good.
Uh,
Also, I want to talk about fortification, right? Fortified foods, you kind of touched on it. It's you can't just take an isolated zinc and think that you're getting all your zinc. There, you need to get these with the cofactors and there's synergy. So yeah, just tell us more about why it's not good to just eat fortified foods and or take a synthetic multivitamin and think you're good.
I mean, say it's just bizarre. You know, a cereal that's fortified with vitamins and minerals. Like you got to hand it to them. They've good imaginations.
They're expert marketers. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. Because I used to say to people before, I said, look at on one side of the screen, you got guys with PhDs in marketing and $1 billion of McDonald's money or Nestle's money or whoever, and on the other side of the screen, you got a hungry 5-year-old. Who's going to win? You know, and a couple of parents who are stressed out trying to pay a mortgage, doing the shopping, and all their markets, their access to good food has been restricted. They're at the mercy of the supermarkets. They're trying to run jobs and run a house, and they do this whole one-stop shop thing at the supermarkets. They're not, you know, food quality, food nutrition is probably number 7 or 8 on their list of requirements before they put a food on the shelf, you know. So as I say to people, get to the farmer's market and buy real food and get to know get provenance into your life. Know who prepares your food. When my kids were small and we'd sit down to dinner, we knew everybody on the table. It was Jenny's bread and Patty's lamb and Bill's vegetables, and we knew everybody who was preparing our food. I was in the market every Saturday, so I was bringing it home. But like, it's very hard for people who don't have that access to it to do the same thing. You know, there were weeks in the market where I was too busy to even bring home food because it'd be really busy in there, and everybody would be packed up and gone. I'd be like, damn it, and I might have to go to the supermarket to buy stuff, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe this stuff. You know, that this is what people
Yeah.
are.
Well, I know it is kind of hard sometimes too for people. Not everyone can just go to the farmers market all the time, and people are busy. What other tips do you have for people?
You just have to prioritize that. That's the, you know, if you think that's trouble or if that's hassle or it's expensive, wait until you see the price of health and how much hassle and how much trouble that's going to be. Illness if you get sick. So it's, you know, it's short-sighted to think that your food supply is not important, for sure, because the consequences of that, once you get away with it. Like people get away with it in their 30s and maybe their 40s, but when you get into your 50s and your 60s, the cumulative effect of years of poor nutrition really come back to get you, you know. And that's the difference between your last 20, 30 years of life being enjoyable and being a misery. So that's where I'm at now. I'm being very careful. And ironically, now my business is doing quite well, and I could eat anything I wanted. And really, what I want to eat is very cheap. It's not expensive. I don't think it is. I eat a lot of raw beef and raw fish and small amounts of it. And I could do a lot of other things with that food wise, but not what my body wants. That's what it needs.
That's how I'm thinking. Yeah, it's actually I don't spend more than anyone else. Probably spend the same or less than people because I'm not buying random snacks. I'm eating less. I'm getting more nutrients for less food. That's why I have a correct body composition.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, it's easy for me. It just takes
Yeah.
a little time to get used to it.
Now, processed food is really expensive. You
It
know?
is. You're paying for all the work that's been done to prepare it.
Absolutely. And the marketing and you name it, everything else that goes with it. So I don't know. It's a really expensive way to eat.
Well, and back to the synergy of foods and fortification. There's just more to the story of for all of history, we ate sort of nose to tail, or we ate what's around us, and nature just works. Where I learned, I don't know how many years ago, that you can't have collagen synthesis without vitamin C, right? That's why people get scurvy, right? If they're not getting fresh meat, they're eating like dried meat and hardtack on these ships. They didn't have any fruit. They they were getting scurvy. So there's so many things here that we don't even know about that we're not realizing. Even modern day, people are taking collagen supplements and then they're just not having any vitamin C, and they're not really your body's not able to use it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, say our bodies don't take minerals, vitamins elementally like that. Like if you take go back to say zinc and copper, that they should be coming in peptides and amino acids. And when you digest a food, a piece of meat or whatever, it gets broken down in digestion into amino acids, peptides, and they flip across the intestinal lumen into the blood, and and then the body synthesizes the proteins that we need, the human proteins that we need to maintain our health. But people take synthetic zinc, synthetic copper, synthetic vitamins. That's not how we ever got our nutrition. That's not how we evolved. And we need to get away from that idea, And then people take really high doses of them, and 1,000 times their recommended daily allowance. And well, when these things are in synergy with their cofactors and they're bioavailable, you don't need to take these massive doses of them. Listen to your body as well, of course. If you're eating the right food, you'll feel good energy. You'll feel you have good energy. You'll feel you're in a good mood. It's when you get sick and you can't eat. It's when you really go downhill. So I might say, I imagine you're sick very rarely. I'm very rarely sick. I can't remember the last time, I was sick, quite honest.
Oh, I don't think I've been sick. Like, if you count like really being sick, it's been over 8 years.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't happen to me anymore. And the calorie bros, I don't know how they kind of just are quiet about this, or I've interviewed some of them, and I remember that one of them was sick during the interview, and I couldn't get through to him about, there's more to life than calories. There's more to nutrition than your calorie counts. And it's just hard to prove, and it's hard to do studies. Like you said, it takes years and years for this stuff to develop, or you see the ill effects of being nutrient deprived.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said earlier, it's simple. Nutrition is really, really simple, and they've made it very complex. And look at the body of knowledge out there around it. But we know what our body needs. We know the way we were designed. We need meat, lots of it.
And we need some seafood. We should get back into oysters, actually, because there's so much interesting history around human development, human evolution, nutrition, what we've gotten for all of history that's kept us healthy. And oysters are part of that story. And I know you get really into that history.
Yeah. An interesting thing happened here recently in Ireland, actually. They found the oldest man-made structure in Ireland, which is probably the oldest man-made structure in Ireland and Britain. So after the last ice age, which would have been about 10,000 years ago, when the ice sheets were clearing off Ireland and the UK, the first hunter-gatherers that would have come here, they were foraging. But the big game didn't exist at the time. So they found there are things called middens. So you have oyster middens, which are massive mounds of oyster shells, which are evidence of human activity where they're eating lots of oysters. But this one is actually made from periwinkles, which are like a little sea snail. And there was some erosion on the west coast of Ireland, and it uncovered this thing. And they reckon there's about 1 billion periwinkles left in it. And it's the oldest man-made structure on the island now. And they're trying to preserve it because it's getting washed into the sea. So these early hunter-gatherers were living on these sea snails. And oysters as well would have been a big part of their early nutrition. We have this image of guys going out, taking down a bull woolly mammoth with spears and axes and stuff. That was a hard day's work. And that was a hard meal. And I don't think there was as much of that going on as we think, And even if you did get a kill, you were fighting off predators to share it and everything else. So they might have got the odd one that was wounded or old or whatever. But, a healthy mammoth, I'd say that was a hard animal to take down. So I think a lot of their food was foraging, and there is evidence to suggest that oysters helped Homo sapiens outwit and outcompete Neanderthals about 250,000 years ago, because they were confined to an area of South Africa, and the caves there are full of oysters, an oyster shell, these middens of oysters. And they think that when they started foraging for oysters, had, first of all, a really good source of protein. Like even to today, protein is a limiting nutrient in diets in certain populations around the world, and our growth is stunted because of it. If you go back to the Napoleonic times and even the First World War, the snipers were ordered to shoot at anybody over 5'6" or over 6 foot even, because they were the officers. They knew they came from good homes and they could afford meat. Everyone else was 5 foot tall. They didn't have protein. Protein was a limiting nutrient. But kids nowadays, like I walk around now, kids are getting a lot of meat. And I look at the height of them, they're like giants. Like the 6 foot. 6 foot is very normal in Ireland now for young men, And they're on because we do have really good meat here, good beef and lamb, and they get it. If they're eating enough of that, they grow quite well. But so for those early Homo sapiens, protein was one. First, and secondly, they're full of omega-3s, so they would have been very good for brain development. And then they had high zinc, which would have led to higher reproductive success as well. And they think that new food source of oysters helped Homo sapiens outcompete Neanderthals, and they exploded from there. They think they might have been reduced to as few as 600 at that time, about 250,000 years ago. And they exploded out of South Africa then, and the rest is history, as we say, you know. So that's an interesting story about how they may have saved us in the first place.
I think that's true. Humans were always around water. It's pretty much, I mean, we
Yeah.
need drinking water, and we could get fish, we could get oysters. It's probably one of the earliest foods because they're just sitting there. These oysters,
Yeah, yeah.
they're always there, right?
It's like a fishmonger's. You go back every day and get a feed. They don't swim away, you know. And then the oyster reefs would have been covered in lobster and shrimp and crab, and they probably had all these things and periwinkles, and all these whelks would have been in among them because they are predators for the oysters as well. So the whole ecosystem there that the oyster reefs themselves would have attracted. So they were like a larder, a marine larder full of food for these guys, you know, when they started figuring it out.
Yeah, I think I did a couple episodes on this, on just marine food, and there's a whole story of humans and being more from the water areas. Do you know anything about that? Of like how we're similar to other aquatic creatures, or we have just like this real synergy with
Yeah.
water throughout evolution?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Evolution states that, or assumes that life has evolved from the sea. But when you analyze our blood, the concentration of sea salts, or salts in our blood, are 60% similar to seawater. And that's another thing that kind of gives credence to the theory of evolution and us
Or
evolving
we're
from the sea.
60% salt. It's the same as seawater, like the same ratio.
They said the ratio of the salts to each other that are 60% similar to human blood.
Mm.
So we're very similar in that way. We're saline creatures ourselves, you know, we need salt. So very important.
Yeah, check out those other episodes. I don't remember the guests I had on, but there's a couple of them. There was a PhD, a man, and a woman that I did these episodes with. Sorry, I can't remember their names. But so what else? So oysters kind of get a bad rap though, because they're kind of filters. People say, I mean, they filter the water, so then they assume that if you eat them, you're gonna get all these toxins.
Yeah. So the most important thing with oysters is they're what we call sessile. They can't move. They're happy to sit there and filter away. So the most important thing with oysters is the source, the water they're grown in. If there's contamination in the water, there's going to be contamination in the oysters. But also with any other fish, but because they're filter feeders, they'll accumulate it faster. And that goes for all shellfish, mussels, clams, scallops. They're all filter feeders, so they will accumulate heavy metals, anything, any kind of pesticides or anything like that much faster. The oysters you get for Oyster Pure are taken from the northwest of Ireland. There's 2,000 kilometers of ocean between there and Newfoundland. It's as clean as it gets. And it's only really agriculture, sheep grazing in the mountains and that. There's no heavy industry there at all. So, as I always said when I started this business, if my kids ain't getting it, nobody's getting it. So, we've really been strict on that. We test every batch of your product for heavy metals. We test it for zinc, copper, manganese, iodine, selenium, and B12. And those figures are on the bottle. So your customers, when they get Oyster Pure, they know they can see exactly what's in there and they can dose themselves accordingly. We like to call it real-time dosing. So you can actually use the product therapeutically. If you want to take X amount of zinc from the product, you can take 6, 8, 12 capsules. It's only concentrated oyster meat at the end of the day, and you can't overdose on it. I've customers taking 20 capsules a day. That's their standard, you know.
Wow. I call it pure oysters. Yeah, pure oysters. It's on my nosetotale.org site.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been taking them. I actually got some blood tests recently because I turned 42 and I wanted to see if I was actually as healthy as I feel. And it was incredible, my results. I'm in the top 1% in so many things, top 5%, and all these things. And my triglyceride to HDL ratio, super low. That is a sign of metabolic health, right? All these things were off the charts. I did a DEXA scan. I was in the perfect body fat range, super low visceral fat, all this stuff. So for one, it's just really, this diet and lifestyle stuff actually works. I've proved it at 42. But most importantly, my testosterone was super high. I I have a testosterone of like a 20-year-old, and I think it's because I started taking the oyster pills. So I remember I had a blood test maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago before I took them, and, it wasn't that impressive. Now I'm up high, and I didn't even have them for 3 weeks before my test because I ran out and there's this whole shipping problem. And so I wasn't even taking them before the test. And I mean, I was up there and I'm feeling great. Like this stuff is amazing.
That's brilliant. That alone should make me a billionaire.
Well, it should.
Testosterone,
The problem is
testosterone is
it's
huge
hard to
problem.
communicate this. It's hard to sell it. Like it's weird. I posted about the oyster pills and someone's like, "Oh, this dude's like just slinging like what do you call them?
Snake oil or something.
Yeah, snake oil," or they're just like, "Oh, boner pills." He's like, "This guy's like advertising boner pills." I'm like, "No, this is just real science. This
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
this is real. Like it boosts your testosterone, but it's just hard to sell because even there's so many other people trying to sell actual fake products, and so they
Yeah, yeah.
have restrictions on advertising and stuff."
All that whole area around aphrodisiacs and testosterone and male sexual health, there's a lot of junk in there and a lot of dodgy products that say they're natural, but they put tadalafil and sildenafil in, which is essentially Viagra, and they sell them as natural aphrodisiacs. And that we're heavily regulated by the FDA, and we get the FDA reports all the time. I've always seen these products being taken off the market because they buy the sildenafil really cheap in China and add it to the product and say, oh, it's a natural whatever product. And if you got blood pressure issues and you take that, it could kill you. So people have got to be very careful. Yeah, and I always say as well with the oyster, you know, the amount of times I've had people come to me and say, "Can you make us something natural like Viagra without any side effects?" And I like, you do realize if I could do that, I'd be a trillionaire.
Yeah.
I said, Viagra is Viagra, but it was, first of all, it was discovered by accident. And secondly, it's created by a pharmaceutical company with some of the pretty serious scientists working on it. So you're getting what they're saying you're getting. Whether it's good for you or not is another question. And this is the thing I say to people about pharma all the time. I said, their standards and their regulations are very tight. If they're saying you're getting 2 milligrams of something in a tablet, you're getting 2 milligrams of something in a tablet. Whereas with us in the dietary supplement end of it, the product we make for you, Pure Oysters, that's one of the most transparent supplements on the market because we test every batch and we give the actual figures of the key nutrients, the ones we can make the health claims on the product. There's very few supplement companies do that. In fact, most of them are labeling incorrectly, and that brings the standards in our industry down and makes us look like a crowd of amateurs. So if we're to be a viable alternative to pharma, or not, I won't say an alternative, but to stand on our own 2 feet as a credible products and credible information, we have to label correctly at the very beginning. So you'll pick up products like you could pick up, I don't know, it could be an organ product and say this product is really high in B vitamins, and then you look at the supplement facts. There's no information on the supplement facts. It doesn't say what B vitamins, how many of them, or anything. So how can you use a product like that? So we can make the proper claims. We can say Pure Oyster is an excellent source of zinc because there's over 20% of your RDA of zinc in 4 capsules in the daily dosage. And that's an FDA requirement, But I don't know, so many companies get away with not doing it. I don't know how to get away with it, but we're a manufacturer. We get inspections from the FDA, and we have to be really monitored really carefully to make sure we're complying with all the regulations. But that's a good thing for us. It's a good thing because it gives us the edge on the competition. It's onerous.
Well,
It's onerous, but it's good.
yeah, and it costs money, and it's not cheap to take the oyster pills, but it's kind of cheap because oysters are very expensive, especially if you buy them in restaurants. Even the cheapest you can get them in the US is $1 oyster at Whole Foods on Fridays. But yours are so concentrated that you, even if, like you said, it's expensive because you have to do the testing. It's a handmade process. I saw it. I was there. Your guys are there doing this by hand, drying it out, putting them in capsules by hand. This is really pure. And yeah, it just costs a lot, but it actually doesn't, right? It's like how many
No, there's about
oysters are,
there's about 6 kilos of 12, about 13, 14 pounds of oysters in one bottle. We
because
don't
it's
say
dried out, so it's concentrated. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's the meat of about 14 pounds of oysters dried out in a bottle. See, we're buying hundreds of tons of these oysters, and they're not what they're called restaurant grade oysters, but the restaurant grade oyster, they want the perfect teardrop shape, certain depth, certain meat content, and they're grown specifically for restaurants. These are wild oysters that are in pure oyster in your product, and they come in all sizes. So we don't go by how many oysters are in a bottle. We go by weight instead. With 14 pounds of oysters, let's say that's 6 kilos. That's about, in a restaurant, that's about 60, could be 50, 60 oysters in a restaurant, at $1. It's the same price, but that's in the shop you can get it for $1. In a restaurant, you're going to pay 4 or 5, you can pay up to $6 an oyster easily.
The real deal. I
Yeah,
like this slow food concept. I actually didn't hear of it before you. I don't know
yeah,
why. It's just I'm in this world, but I didn't hear that term. So yes, I will pay more for real olive oil, and I hope other people do.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about the just a slow food concept, or I don't even where this came from.
Well, there's a guy in Italy called Carlo Petrini, and in 1986, McDonald's tried to open a restaurant on the steps of the Piazza di Spagna in Rome, and he went down with a group of people, and they cooked up plates of penne and all this beautiful Italian food they do, and said, "Look, this is what you're swapping for this McDonald's stuff, and it's going to destroy our food culture and our economy and all these local producers and everything." And from that, slow food was born. So slow food is really about, it has a couple of different principles. One is about how food is reared, how it's processed or produced, how it's prepared for food for consumption, and how it's eaten. So it's the antithesis of fast food, and it's like about getting really good ingredients from the farm, cooking a really nice meal, taking your time, sitting down with friends and having a meal and a conversation, as opposed to sitting with a ready meal on your lap watching soap operas on TV. And it's all about that. And they set up conviviums then. And so it's all about the conviviality of food. So there's a convivium here in Wicklow at Meats called the Garden Convivium. And they meet up every month and they cook a meal and have a meal and chat about food issues and that. There's a good few of them in America. They're called slow food convivia. And, there could be one in Austin. I'm not sure, but there's a couple in California and a couple in New York. And you could start one. Just get in touch and say, it's not a radical militaristic movement or that. But for example, they would say, let's say there was a rare breed of cow in Austin that's in danger of becoming extinct because of industrial food production. They would come along and say, right, let's do something about this. Let's educate the young farmers to keep using this breed of cattle. Let's get the local chefs using it. Let's do a few events and, kill a few of these cattle and have a big barbecue or cook some whatever with them and get interest in it and try and make it economically viable again and get support from the community and that. So they do those kind of things. And they've also got the arc of the slow arc, which is the arc of slow food, where they put all the foods that are endangered of going extinct because of our modern food production system. And they're the foods that they try and preserve, and food production techniques and agricultural techniques and all these things. So they have a meeting every year. They have slow food. Every second year they meet. They have one in Turin and Torino. They have slow food. And then the alternate year they have slow fish in Genoa. So it's slow food one year, slow fish the next, and they alternate. So we used to go to them every year, bring our oyster bar from Ireland, and they loved it there. They had a great time. But oh my God, the food at it, the olive oil, cheeses, the hams, the Serrano hams from Italy, and just incredible food, I was tasting 100-year-old balsamic vinegar at the last one. The price of it, oh my God. I said, I'll come home some evening, the kids will be putting that on a chips or something. It's like hundreds of dollars for a bottle of it,
Wow. Yeah, I think I'm accidentally in the slow food movement. I mean, here at Sapien Center, and
Yeah,
this
of
is
course.
just this is a community. This is what we're doing. I just
But
didn't know it was called slow food. We call it real food. We call whatever you call it.
it's all farm reared, I have, but we're very involved with the Wise Traditions and the Weston A. Price Foundation, and they have a shopping guide. And I weep when I see that because there's some amazing food and pasture reared chicken and stuff that I can't get in Ireland. And really good pork, pasture raised pork, and that I can get good organic pork here. It's not easy though. Beef and lamb, we have exceptional beef and lamb here. Pork and chicken's a bit of a disaster, like it is everywhere, because of the way they're farmed. And fish, we have fantastic seafood, of course. I'm in the seafood business, but Yeah, that Wise Traditions brochure, and you got amazing logistics in the US. Your road transport logistics are second to none. So there's no reason why anybody can't get really good meat in the US for sure. It's just
Yeah, I found
just in Italy and Spain they have hundreds and hundreds of years of curing techniques and all with foods and some amazing produce that they do. Some of these anchovy extracts and stuff,
mm,
the botarga and the dried fish and the mullet roll botarga that they grate into their pastas and stuff like that, and truffles and all these things. That
the
it's
fish
such a
eggs, the
history.
roe.
Yeah, the fish roll and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
The real unusual stuff there.
Well, yeah, I got firsthand experience about Ireland and not having the best roads and logistics. These roads are miniature. Actually, my buddy was driving and he popped our tire because it was such a narrow road, and you helped us, get out of that mess. But yeah, Ireland is great for beef, lamb, seafood, not so much for the other stuff, and
Yeah.
not so much for health these days. I think you know a bit about like what's going wrong in modern Ireland, like food world and health.
That's it. It's the same as it is everywhere. Ireland and the UK now about 26% adult obesity. The US is 40. We're going to catch up on you soon, or seem to be determined to do that. I mean, so they're chronic statistics. Well, how bad does that have to get before something happens? Before they put a tax on sugar or carbohydrates or whatever? It's for me. I think it's quite simple. It's our lifestyle. It's our move away from the ecological baseline, and it's cheap processed food. You've got your seed oils, you've got your sugar, your processed carbohydrates. They're all toxic to the body, and the cost of it to the humanity and to human health is just will never be recognized. The people who are doing it will never have to pay for it. It's criminal behavior. And I look at kids. If a kid is 3 or 4 stone overweight when they're 14, what are they going to be like at 30 if they even make it that far? What kind of life are they going to have? You know?
It's getting crazy, and
Yeah.
yeah, I've been around Ireland. That was only the second time I've been there, but a lot of fried food, a lot of people in the cities that aren't looking very well.
Oh yeah.
So,
That's all over. Like I blame a lot of it on see, we couldn't wait to get supermarkets, so they've hardwired this existence into people's lives. This idea on Saturday, go to the supermarket, buy your shopping for the week, drive up to the door, load everything into the car. Like this town where I live is 14,000 people. We used to have 15 butchers on the main street. There's one left. The last vegetable shop my friend owned, he closed down 3 years ago. So our
mm,
last vegetable shop closed down. We 14 pharmacies. You know, what's wrong there? And I say to the pharmacists, I said, when are you guys going to start selling meat and vegetables? You're going to sell all this other stuff. You should be selling them too. That'd be a good idea. She said, I never thought about that. I said, well, that'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
oh man, I don't think that's gonna happen. Yeah, we're talking about opposite systems here. We got the standard, yeah, big pharma, big food paradigm versus us little guys just trying to do our
Yeah.
own thing here.
I know people go on that it's a conspiracy and they're doing it on purpose and everything. Personally, I think it's just greed driven. They figured out they can make loads of money doing all these things, and they're just pursuing that. And like you say, good food is simple. That's simple too. They're making you sick on one level and then selling you drugs to try and treat an illness that's entirely preventable by proper nutrition. Why does
Yeah.
never every GP's practice have a dietitian? Why don't they have an osteopath? I go to an osteopath. He saved me surgery on 3 occasions. I went and had scans done, and orthopedic surgeons wanted to bring me in and do surgery. I went to the osteopath twice, and he cured the problem. $200. Now there are other things he can't cure. There are other things that orthopedic surgeons are needed for, but
Mhm.
it's never a one size fits all. And you have to be. That's the big takeout for me is you have to be proactive about your health and your wellness in the modern day. Because if you just go along with the flow and go along with the modern medical profession, you're just going to be a statistic in there, and you're going to be passed from one to the other to the next. And you're never going to get the right treatment, which is to lose weight, to get back to a weight, a proper BMI and a proper weight and a proper body fat index and a good diet and so forth. Start with them. And if you're sick after that, yeah, sure, people get sick. They're unfortunate things happen. But like the only time I'll be at a doctor's is if I need stitches for something. Usually it's an
Mm.
oyster knife or something's done a job on me, and I have to go get a few stitches. But I haven't done a Rambo on that yet and stitched myself up. I might contemplate that actually next time. I
Oh
see.
man.
It's a bit crazy.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Weston Price. I love Weston Price and Hilda. You took Hilda around Ireland. I know that was within the last year. That's awesome. Hilda's cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for all this info. It's simple and it's makes sense and you're living the life and doing the things. So, appreciate
Well,
you.
I think meeting guys like you is very serendipitous. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet here. We know what's right, and it's just we got to keep putting it out there, keep getting the truth out, and get everybody that gets healthy is a win. Everybody gets back to that point, and I try and tell people nothing tastes as good as
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so many other conditions, but just their general life can't be, you know, so many other conditions, but just their general life can't be, they're missing a lot, even just to move and exercise.
Mm.
And, it's really, really sad, and it's
It is.
totally preventable.
And I was going down that path. It's not genetics. Yeah, some people can get away with more things than others. They have quote better genetics that let them get away with things more than others, but it's not that your genetics doom you to that being overweight and sick. And I was going down that path. I was 30 and I what you're talking about. I couldn't play the sports anymore. I couldn't move around as well. I had the joint pain. I had the indigestion. I had all these little things, and then I just changed my diet, and now I'm 42, way healthier than I was at 30. So yeah, don't make that excuse that it's genetic.
Yeah, it creeps up on you. But about 4 years ago, I saw pictures of myself about 4 years ago, and I was like, oh my god, you couldn't even see my chin. And
Oh
I was
man.
like, and I was sure I was looking at myself in the mirror, and the pounds creep up ounce by ounce, and you don't notice it. But when you look back at yourself 4 years ago, minus 20 or plus 20 kilos, you think, oh my god, I was heading in a bad direction. I was lucky I pulled myself back from the edge there because I'm 55. My dad died at 54 with a heart attack. So I'm
Mm.
kind of plays on my mind all the time too. Well, he was a heavy smoker, but and I don't smoke, so that's it's something I think about a lot, though. So and the doctors always said to me, "Oh, you've got a history of heart disease in the family," because my brother died of a heart attack too, but he was a heavy smoker.
Mm.
And I said, "Well, do we have a history of heart disease, or do we have a history of heavy smoking and bad diet?" And they're like, "Oh, no, it's genetic. There's a genetic element there." And I'm like, "All right, well, I'll be the guinea pig then. You're scraping me off the floor in a few years' time. I'll know that you were right."
They're not. No, I'll bet on you. I bet on Mark Sisson, who was my last podcast guest. And yeah, you're living the life. Check out our products. Yeah, it's pure oysters. It's on nosetail.org. I really believe in it. Happy I met you a couple years ago. And thanks again.
No, no. Well, you got to come back now. I'll give you the grand tour. There's a few places I want to show you when you come back to Ireland. So,
Yeah,
so
I need more time. We had a very limited time and we bumped around the whole island in a very short amount of time without you
Irish
actually.
roads. Well, when you see grass growing down the middle of the road, you know you're in trouble. You know you're in Ireland.
Oh yeah.
You got to start slowing down.
All right, Stephen. We actually, yeah, I'm glad we made that trip safely and we'll come back again and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Brian.